رأى أمه وإخوته الصغار يقتلون أمام عينيه فقالوا له لا تتحرك.
You will die like these two rabbits, you enemies of Allah. Do you believe it now? We will kill you all with our chemical and biological weapons. Look for yourselves. Do you see these rabbits? They inhaled chemical weapons for 1 minute only, and they're dead. Your destiny will be like them because you are supporters of Bashar al-Assad. God is great. God is great. Wait and see. We are from the Ari Asasar Chemical Battalion. We will kill you with our chemical weapons.
The video has not been verified. This is an important point to make, but certainly the message it sends out is ominous.
War's chemical romance, a love affair that goes back centuries in Western and Middle Eastern history. From the Germans' use of chlorine gas on the French during the Battle of Ypres in 1915, the United States' use of Agent Orange on civilians and combatants alike in Southeast Asia, and the Israelis' use of white phosphorus on Palestinians in Gaza, all events justified or denied by their respective users. Today, all of these countries accuse the Syrian government with the use of chemical weapons. Ten years after the use of chemical weapons of mass destruction by U.S. forces in Iraq, its next-door neighbor, Syria, is accused of using a different kind of chemical.
Growing concern that the Assad regime may be preparing to use chemical weapons against its own people.
In December of 2012, an unnamed Pentagon official stated to NBC that there was no evidence the Syrian government had used or were in the process of mixing chemical agents. That same month, the Syrian government was threatened by a group calling itself the Chemical Brigade of Al-Ri Assasar. In March 2013, questionable intelligence will be used to implicate the use of chemical weapons by government forces in Halep.
Can you confirm, based on information you have seen, that the Syrian government has, in fact, used chemical weapons, or are you simply saying there's a probability that they may?
I think there's a probability that they may, but Charlie, we have a whole history here now that's not looking very good. So we know in the past public reports have shown that they've taken chemical weapons and configured them in a way that they could be used at a moment's notice. We know for a fact that happened. There has been some forensic evidence that at least small quantities may have been used in the past, and then you have this exchange of conversation between the opposition and the government about the use of chemical weapons.
Between the 22nd and 25th of April, seemingly separate events would build storylines of 5 different countries: the United States, Turkey, Israel, France, and the UK.
Last week, I ordered the deployment of a U.S. Army headquarters element to enhance this effort in Amman. These personnel will continue to work alongside the Jordanian armed forces to improve readiness and prepare for a number of scenarios. As part of this effort, the Department of Defense is funding over $70 million for activities in Jordan, including providing training and equipment to detect and stop any chemical weapons transfers along its border with Syria. While I cannot discuss specific plans in an open session, we have been developing options and planning for a post-Assad Syria, and we will continue to provide the President and Congress with our assessment of options for U.S. military intervention.
We are in no doubt that the gas was used. Why? Well, on the one hand, the journalists from Le Monde, to whom we are very grateful, supplied us with samples which we had analysed. And then there was another case. We went back through the chain of events and we analysed those other samples. And the lab's conclusion was clear. It was sarin gas.
On the 22nd of April, new Defense Secretary Hagel visits Israel, where extensive talks were held on various topics. One of those topics involved Syria and its chemical weaponry.
According to our professional assessment, the regime has used deadly weapons against armed rebels on a number of occasions.
24 hours later, an Israeli brigadier general announced that their intelligence had discovered the use of chemical weapons by the Syrian Arab Army.
The U.S. intelligence community assesses with some degree of varying confidence that the Syrian regime has used chemical weapons on a small scale.
And on the 25th of April, Ago's announcement echoed that.
As I've said,
General Salim Idris, formerly of the Syrian Arab Army, Idris departed to the rebel faction and became a spokesman for the group.
The U.S. government is concerned that these weapons that you're asking for could fall into the hands of extremists with ties to Al-Qaeda. How do you guarantee them that that won't happen?
It is very simply, we have a very good organized structure in our command, and I can, under my responsibility, give any kind of guarantee that these weapons and ammunition will not fall in the hands of extremists, if there are extremists.
إسرائيل بلد عدو، وأنا أمام الجميع أقول بلد عدو لسوريا وتحتل أراضي من سوريا. لن يتغير موقفنا في الجيش الحر من هذا البلد إلا بعد أن تنسحب من الأراضي السورية وتقر بحقوق المشروعة للشعب العربي الفلسطيني، وما يقره الشعب العربي في سوريا نحن نلتزم.
That this would be a red line if they use chemical weapons. The President of the United States has now told
Senator McCain suggests the answer to this problem is to unite all Syrian rebel groups into one under General Idris.
We know that Senator McCain has pushed for arming the rebels.
Well, he went there to talk with armed rebel commanders inside Syria. We've spoken to an activist who organized and participated in the trip. We know that he was on the ground for about an hour. He met with rebel commanders. Most prominently, he met with the leader of the Free Syrian Army, General Salim Idris, and they really discussed a whole series of issues, from Hezbollah's involvement with the conflict to the growing problem of extremism within the rebellion. And both Idris and McCain reportedly agreed that the best way to deal with extremism would be to try to unite the rebels under the command of General Idris, who's a moderate, and to arm General Idris.
Are there any weapons you are not comfortable giving them?
I am comfortable with giving them whatever the weapons they need to defend themselves against the onslaught of Russian weapons of the most sophisticated kind, Iranian weapons, and the kinds of unequal battlefield that we're in today. And I am absolutely convinced that we need to have heavy weapons, both anti-tank and anti-air.
Commission itself, the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Syrian Arab Republic, has put out a statement clarifying that the Commission has not reached any conclusive findings regarding the use of chemical weapons in Syria or who used them if they were used. The fact of the matter is, as we have said, and I have said many times, we are highly skeptical of suggestions that the opposition could have or did use chemical weapons. We find it highly likely that any chemical weapon use that has taken place in Syria was done by the Assad regime, and that remains our position.
However, 3 days later, Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan had this to say.
It is clear that the regime has used chemical weapons, missiles.
Directly contradicting the statement from the White House that no conclusion had been made at that time on who used chemical weapons. 3 weeks after PM Erdogan's interview, an arrest was made in Turkey that would break the case of chemical weapons wide open.
Turkish special anti-terror forces have detained 12 people. That's what we know. They are suspected of having links with the Al-Nusra Front, which is the Al-Qaeda affiliated Syrian rebel group aimed at toppling the Syrian President Bashar Assad. Now, the group was seized in southern Turkey, and that is according to local media reports. The media also saying that they carried a 2-kilogram cylinder with the nerve agent sarin. Now, Turkish authorities haven't yet commented on this report, and we are waiting to hear from them.
Going back to December of 2012 and the gassing of 2 rabbits, Some of the labels on these chemicals are from the company Tekem, a chemical company based in Turkey. A New York Times article from June of 2012 alluded to the fact that CIA officers were in southern Turkey attempting to keep weapons out of the hands of terrorist groups.
There's a moment to try to tip the scales, and we believe that moment is now.
Menendez and his Republican colleague Bob Corker sent a bill to the Senate floor that would provide weapons to a select group of moderate rebel fighters. It's the farthest Congress has gone yet. Corker said the U.S. must help the moderates or risk having extremist forces take over if Assad falls.
It would be very harming to U.S. national interest to have a country that has chemical weapons there, compounds throughout the country, controlled by extreme elements like Al-Qaeda.
On May 21st, the Menendez-Corker bill was passed with a vote of 15-3. The Syria Transition Support Act of 2013. Section 4 states the goal is for the U.S. to engage with opposition groups that reflect U.S. interests and values, and to recognize groups such as the Syrian Opposition Coalition, legitimate successor groups, and appropriate subgroups as representatives, not defining in particular what appropriate subgroups mean. Section 501 speaks of the U.S. providing lethal and increased non-lethal assistance to vetted elements of the Syrian opposition, and defense training provided by the United States to particular units of the Free Syrian Army and other Syrian entities opposed to the government of Bashar al-Assad.
So you disagreed with some of the decisions that were being taken, that you were being asked effectively to sell to the Syrians because they were using you as the salesman. That's what you're implying.
تماما. أمور عديدة أنا لا أوافق عليها، وهناك اتفاقات غامضة بالنسبة لي وأظنها ليست مناسبة للشعب السوري.
Mosa Khatib, the SNC president for about 4 months, quits in April 2013. The resignation comes after a plea to the United States to remove al-Nusra Front from a list of recognized terrorist organizations. Feeling undermined, Khatib felt al-Nusra had played an important part in some battles and was popular with some Syrians.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning.
And finally, in June of 2013, President Obama chooses yes on weapons and military training to rebels.
America now says it will send weapons to the rebels, small arms, not the rockets needed to take out tanks or planes. Tonight, we met a top rebel leader who says that's not enough. The weapons won't be good enough for us to win, he said. I'm afraid they'll just make the war go on longer.